A message doesn't have to be long to change everything. Sometimes it's only 2 words. 2 words sitting quietly inside a phone. Easy to overlook, easy to dismiss. But after what happened in a quiet Maryland neighborhood, those 2 words became impossible to forget. Help me. They were sent by a 15-year-old girl just days before investigators say her life was taken. By the time detectives uncovered the full story, another child had also been killed, a family had been shattered, and a neighborhood was asking the same painful question. Could this have been stopped? Before we begin, if you enjoy well-researched true crime cases that go beyond the headlines and uncover the real stories behind each case, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new investigation.
All right. Good evening. I'm Chief Robert McCullough, Chief of the Baltimore County Police Department. This evening at approximately 7:20 p.m., officers from the Woodlawn Precinct of the Baltimore County Police Department were dispatched to the 6100 block of Tallis Road for a shooting. Officers entered the location and found 2 juveniles deceased at this location. The 2 juveniles were pronounced deceased at the time of the entry by our police officers. At this time, our homicide unit has responded to the location, and we right now have an ongoing homicide investigation. I've seen a lot of things in my career, but this is something that's horrific. It's tragic. It's something that doesn't happen in this community here. I've worked here for a long time.
Long before police tape surrounded the home, it was simply another house on a quiet street in Gwynn Oak, Maryland. Inside lived a family trying to build a normal life. 15-year-old Giovanna Gigi Myrie wasn't the kind of teenager people easily forgot. Friends and relatives remembered someone who took pride in herself. She enjoyed golf, trained in karate, and rarely stepped outside without making sure everything from her hair to her nails looked exactly the way she wanted. It wasn't about being perfect. It reflected confidence, personality, and the excitement of being a teenager with dreams still taking shape. Her younger brother, 9-year-old Stephen Allen, couldn't have been more different. He loved basketball. He loved Roblox. Most of all, he loved being with the people who made him feel safe. Not long before the tragedy, neighbors had celebrated his birthday together. There had been laughter, children running around outside, and the kind of memories families expect to make for years. No one could have imagined how quickly those happy moments would become painful reminders of what had been lost. But while life inside the house appeared normal from the outside, investigators would later uncover evidence suggesting something deeply troubling had already begun. And it started with a relationship.
Meantime, we start with Fox 45's Keith Daniels. He's live and joins us with an update in the Gwynn Oak double shooting. Keith?
Well, Kai, Baltimore County police say the boy lives in West Baltimore. Police arrested him this morning, and tonight, a 16-year-old boy charged as an adult faces 2 counts of murder. Inside the Randallstown Community Center, Baltimore County Police Chief Robert McCullough with a major announcement.
We've made an arrest in the July 7th homicide.
16-year-old Keith Maurice James Jr. arrested, charged as an adult in connection with the shooting deaths of 9-year-old Steve Allen and his sister, 15-year-old Giovanna Myrie, Gigi. Baltimore County Executive Kathy Klossmeyer.
Please keep the families in your prayers.
And Councilman Julian Jones standing with the chief Wednesday with word of a break in the case that resonated across the community. A young boy and his sister murdered, now an arrest. The accused, another young teen.
I am just taken back by the fact that young people at the age of 16 years old will not only have access to a gun, but have the propensity to actually murder someone and murder 2 people. So this is an absolute sad day for all of us here in our community, in our country, that this type of violence takes place and is being perpetrated by young people.
According to investigators, Gigi had been communicating with a 16-year-old boy named Keith Maurice James Jr. The relationship had reportedly lasted only a couple of months. At first glance, that might not sound unusual. Teenagers meet, they text, they spend hours talking on the phone. For many families, it's simply part of growing up. But detectives say this relationship was different. Witnesses later told investigators they had seen Keith displaying a handgun during FaceTime conversations with Gigi. Investigators also reported that witnesses claimed he made threats if she became involved with another boy. If those allegations are true, they reveal something investigators often see in abusive relationships. Regardless of age, control slowly replacing affection. Not all dangerous relationships begin with violence. Sometimes they begin with intimidation. Sometimes they begin with fear. And sometimes the warning signs are visible only after tragedy forces everyone to look back. Just days before everything changed, investigators say Gigi reached out to someone she trusted. She didn't make a public post. She didn't call emergency services. Instead, she sent a private message to a friend. According to charging documents, she wrote that Keith had threatened her with a firearm if she were ever unfaithful. She ended the message with two simple words, "Help me." When detectives later recovered that message, it became one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. Because now everyone knew something that couldn't be changed. She had recognized the danger before anyone else understood how serious it was. And only a few days later, everything investigators feared became reality. July 7th began like any ordinary summer afternoon. People went to work. Children stayed home. Traffic moved through Baltimore County without interruption. Nothing suggested that before sunset, 2 young lives would be gone. According to investigators, surveillance footage and digital evidence later showed Keith leaving a city bus shortly after 4 o'clock that afternoon. The stop was roughly half a mile from Gigi's home. From there, detectives say he walked the remaining distance. For nearly an hour, investigators would later place him in the area, using surveillance footage, witness information, and cell phone data. Then, sometime afterward, investigators alleged 2 children were killed inside the home. The exact sequence of events inside the house has not been publicly detailed in full. What is known is heartbreaking enough. Around 7:20 that evening, their mother returned home from work, expecting nothing more than another ordinary night with her children. Instead, she walked into every parent's worst nightmare. Inside the home were 15-year-old Gigi and 9-year-old Stephen. Both had been fatally shot. No parent expects to discover something like that. No amount of preparation can soften that moment. Within minutes, flashing emergency lights washed across the neighborhood as officers rushed to secure the scene. Neighbors stepped outside. Questions spread faster than answers. Who could have done this? Why would anyone hurt 2 children? And where had the killer gone? Those questions launched an investigation that would move with remarkable speed. Because unlike many homicide cases, detectives weren't starting from nothing. The evidence had already begun leaving a trail, and much of that trail had been recorded without anyone realizing it. Investigators weren't relying on a single witness. Instead, they began assembling hundreds of small pieces that, together, formed what prosecutors describe as a detailed timeline. Neighborhood surveillance cameras, public transportation footage, digital location records, cell phone evidence. Each source filled another gap. According to investigators, surveillance later showed Keith leaving the neighborhood after the killings and boarding another city bus. Detectives also noted something they considered significant: the clothing. Investigators say he had changed his hoodie before leaving the area. At first glance, that might seem insignificant, but investigators often pay attention to behavior that suggests someone believed they needed to avoid recognition. Changing only part of an outfit doesn't necessarily erase a person's identity, especially when surveillance cameras capture everything else. As detectives compared footage from different locations, the timeline became increasingly detailed. Every bus stop, every camera angle, every recorded movement. Piece by piece, investigators believed they were closing in on the person responsible. But there was one question they still needed answered. Would the evidence be strong enough to support an arrest? By the next morning, detectives weren't chasing random leads. They were testing a timeline built from technology, witness accounts, and physical evidence. Investigators say surveillance footage captured the same teenage suspect traveling toward the neighborhood before the killings and leaving afterward. Cell phone data, they allege, supported those movements. Witness statements added more pieces to the puzzle. On their own, each detail might have raised questions. Together, investigators believed they told a much clearer story. One detail, in particular, caught detectives' attention. According to investigators, the suspect changed his hoodie before leaving the area. Changing clothes after a crime doesn't automatically prove guilt. There can be innocent explanations for changing clothing. But detectives often examine whether someone's actions suggest an effort to avoid recognition or distance themselves from a crime scene. Investigators say that, in this case, the clothing change became one factor among many they considered while reconstructing the afternoon. As every hour passed, the timeline became more complete. The digital trail wasn't disappearing. It was becoming harder to ignore. And soon, detectives decided they had enough evidence to take the next step. The morning after the killings, investigators returned with a warrant. Keith Maurice James Jr., who was 16 years old at the time, was taken into custody. Prosecutors charged him as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with a firearm-related charge. It's important to remember that criminal charges are allegations. Under the law, every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until guilt is proven in court. During questioning, investigators say Keith acknowledged that he and Gigi had communicated for roughly 2 months. According to charging documents, he denied being with her after an earlier date. Investigators, however, allege that surveillance footage, witness accounts, and digital evidence contradicted that version of events. As the case moved into the court system, another question emerged. Should a 16-year-old face these allegations in juvenile court or adult court? Given the seriousness of the charges, prosecutors pursued the case in adult court. Court records show that requests to move him to juvenile detention were denied, and he remained held without bail while the case continued through the legal process. Even as those decisions were being made, one part of the investigation remained unfinished. At the time authorities announced the charges, investigators had not publicly confirmed recovering the firearm believed to have been used in the killings. That didn't end the case. Instead, detectives continued gathering evidence while prosecutors prepared for future court proceedings. Every investigation evolves over time. Some questions are answered quickly. Others take months, or even years. Court filings contain timelines. Investigative reports contain evidence. Surveillance footage captures movement. But one piece of evidence stands apart because of its simplicity. A text message. According to investigators, just days before the killings, Gigi told a friend she had been threatened. She didn't write pages of explanation. She didn't describe every fear she carried. She ended with 2 words: "Help me." Those words have echoed far beyond the courtroom. They've prompted difficult conversations about teenage dating violence, coercive control, and whether warning signs are always recognized before it's too late. Many people picture cries for help as dramatic emergency phone calls or public pleas. Real life isn't always like that. Sometimes a warning arrives quietly. Sometimes it appears in a private conversation between friends. Sometimes the person reaching out hopes someone will understand without needing every detail explained. No single message can tell the entire story, but investigators say this one became an important part of understanding the relationship they believe existed before the tragedy. For many people following the case, it's also the hardest part to forget, not because it explains everything, but because it suggests someone knew they were afraid.
Funeral arrangements have been finalized for the sister and brother found fatally shot inside their home in Gwynn Oak last week. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell joins us live with a heartfelt statement from the family and the latest on this investigation. Alexa.
Yeah, that's right, Mary. That statement was posted by a school one of the siblings attended. Meanwhile, Baltimore County Police confirming still no arrests.
Here at St. Casimir Church in Southeast Baltimore is where family and friends will gather to honor 15-year-old Gigi Myrie and her 9-year-old brother, Steve Allen, on Tuesday, July 21st, exactly 2 weeks after the siblings were found fatally shot inside of their home here on Towles Road in Gwynn Oak.
As investigators continued their work, another heartbreaking responsibility fell upon the families: saying goodbye. Funeral services brought together classmates, neighbors, teachers, relatives, and members of the wider community. People remembered Gigi's confidence, kindness, and determination. They remembered Steven's smile, his love of basketball, his excitement over video games, and the joy he brought wherever he went. Instead of watching them grow into adulthood, their loved ones were left sharing memories. No courtroom decision can return what was taken. No verdict can erase an empty bedroom. No sentence can give parents another birthday, another family dinner, or another ordinary evening together. Those losses remain long after cameras leave and headlines disappear. That's why cases like this continue to resonate, not because of their legal complexity, but because they remind us that every case file represents real people whose futures ended far too soon. When stories like this appear in the news, it's easy to focus on arrests, court hearings, and legal arguments. Those details matter. Justice matters. Due process matters. But before any of those things, there were two children. A 15-year-old girl with plans for her future. A 9-year-old boy who should have had countless birthdays still ahead of him. Their names deserve to be remembered for more than the tragedy that brought them into the headlines. This case also leaves behind difficult questions that communities continue to wrestle with. How do we recognize warning signs earlier? How do we help young people understand the difference between care and control? How do we make sure someone asking for help isn't left feeling unheard? Those questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking. At the time of this recording, the criminal case remains active, and future court proceedings will determine the legal outcome based on the evidence presented in court. We'll continue following verified developments as they become public, because every update matters, not for the sake of headlines, but for the families still waiting for justice, and for Gigi and Stephen, whose lives deserve to be remembered with dignity, not simply as victims, but as two children whose futures should have been filled with possibility.